crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the grand hall as servants moved silently between tables, laden with roasted meats and honeyed fruits. Mira kept her eyes downcast, as was proper for an Omega in the presence of so many powerful wolves. The annual Feast of the Moon drew alphas from every territory. Their dominance thickened the air like smoke. She balanced the silver pitcher carefully, refilling goblets with blood wine as she'd been trained. Invisible. That was the key to survival in the Lycan King's court: remain unseen. Unheard, unremarkable. More wine, commanded a rough voice to her left. Mira turned, pitcher raised, and found herself face to face with Lord Cassius of the Northern Reaches. His eyes were pale gray, unusual among their kind, and held a warmth that startled her. For just a heartbeat, their gazes locked. Thank you, he said softly, and something in his tone made her chest tighten. She nodded, careful not to speak, and moved to the next guest. But she felt those gray eyes following her progress around the table. At the head of the hall, King Demon sat upon his throne of blackened wood and silver. His massive frame dwarfed the chair, dark hair falling past his shoulders, gold eyes tracking every movement in his domain. At 28, he was the youngest king in their history and the most brutal. He'd taken the throne by challenge, defeating his own father in combat 5 years prior. Mira had served in the castle for 3 years. Ever since her parents' death left her orphaned and packless. As an Omega without family ties, she'd been fortunate to find placement in the royal household, even in the lowest position. She'd learned quickly to avoid the king's notice. His temper was legendary, his punishment severe. She made her rounds, refilling cups, removing plates, keeping her movements smooth and efficient. But somehow, inexplicably, her eyes kept drifting back to Lord Cassius. He spoke with those around him, laughed at their jests. But occasionally his gaze would find hers across the crowded hall. It was dangerous, foolish, she knew better. Omega. The word cracked through the hall like a whip. Every conversation ceased. Every head turned. King Demon stood, his golden eyes blazing with barely contained fury. They were fixed on Mira. Her blood turned to ice. The pitcher trembled in her hands as she immediately dropped into a deep bow, forehead nearly touching the floor. Your Majesty, come here. The command resonated with alpha power, pulling at her Omega nature, demanding obedience. She set down the pitcher with shaking hands and crossed the hall, feeling hundreds of eyes upon her. When she reached the dais, she prostrated herself fully. Look at me. She raised her head slowly, forcing herself to meet those terrible golden eyes. Up close, the king was overwhelming. Power and dominance radiated from him in waves that made her Wolf whimper and cower. How long have you served in my household? His voice was deceptively calm, which somehow made it worse. 3 years, Your Majesty. 3 years. And in those 3 years have you learned nothing of protocol? He descended the steps slowly, each footfall deliberate. Of your place? I don't understand, Your Majesty. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. He stopped inches from her, towering over her kneeling form. You were looking at Lord Cassius. It wasn't a question. Horror washed through her. She'd thought she'd been subtle, careful. Your Majesty, I meant no disrespect. Don't look at him again. The words were spoken quietly, but they growled through the hall with unmistakable menace. Every alpha present heard the warning, the possession, the threat. I won't, Your Majesty. I apologize, I said. Don't look at him again. He leaned down, his face close to hers. You are in my household. Under my protection. Under my authority. When you serve at my table, your eyes belong to me. Do you understand? Asterisk, she nodded frantically. Yes, your majesty. I understand. Asterisk, but something flickered in his expression, something that wasn't entirely anger. His nostrils flared slightly, and she realized with dawning horror that he was scenting her. Her fear, yes, but something else too. Something that made his eyes narrow. Asterisk, you will serve the head table only tonight, he said abruptly, straightening. You will keep your eyes on your work, and you will not look at any of my guests. If you do, I will know, and there will be consequences. Asterisk, yes, your majesty. Asterisk, he returned to his throne, and the hall gradually resumed its festivities, though the atmosphere remained tense. Mira kept her gaze firmly downward as she moved to serve the head table, her heart hammering against her ribs. Asterisk, she could feel the king's eyes on her constantly now, tracking her every movement. It was suffocating, terrifying, and somehow shamefully thrilling in a way she didn't want to examine. Asterisk, as she poured wine for the Queen Mother, she caught whispered conversation from the nearby alphas. Asterisk, interesting reaction from His Majesty. Asterisk, indeed. Over an omega, no less. Asterisk, perhaps she's more than she appears. Asterisk, or perhaps, said a third voice smugly, our king has finally found something that interests him. Asterisk, Myra's hands remained steady through sheer force of will. She finished her service and retreated to the servants' passages, her mind reeling. The king's words echoed in her thoughts. Your eyes belong to me. What had she stumbled into?